All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Show. Now, I want to talk about some college football teams to look out for in the year 2020. I know just recently we wrapped up the 2019 season as the LSU Tigers got the best of the Clemson Tigers for the national championship. But who is going to have that inside track in regards to hoisting the trophy for next season? And don't look now, but Clemson is going to once again be back in the mix. We've seen the Tigers consistently make the college football playoff. They're going to be there once again. You look at the job that head coach Dabo Swinney has done in recruiting, and he's basically put a blanket over the recruiting bed in the state of South Carolina. He gets any kid that he wants from that region, and he's also expanding into other states in the Southeast. Trevor Lawrence will be back for his junior season. I think he wants to close out his college football career with a bang, especially after Clemson lost and they missed out on having an opportunity to repeat as national champions. The really shocking part of it was the fact that Travis Etienne, the all-world running back for for Clemson rather, decided to come back to school and, put the NFL on the back burner. That was a real head scratcher for me. I thought he was going to go to the draft, but at the same time, the NFL's loss is definitely Clemson's gain. So you're definitely going to see Clemson back in the mix. You have Justin Ross at wide receiver. You also have a dynamic defensive coordinator in Brent Venables. And with the exception of a road game to take on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish next season, Clemson is really not going to be touched in the ACC. They're going to win the ACC once again next year, and they're going to be right back in the mix to not only make the college football playoff, but also win a national championship. Two teams to look out for to bust into that New Year's Six bowl conversation would be both the Cincinnati Bearcats and the Memphis Tigers out of the American Athletic Conference. You look at Luke Fickell and the job that he has done during his time as the head football coach at Cincinnati. And for whatever reason, the big programs continuously look him over. But this guy has built a winner in Cincinnati. They are one of the top teams in the AAC. And outside of losing 2 games to Memphis this year, that's all that prevented the Bearcats from making a New Year's Six bowl game. They're going to be right back in the mix again next year. Why? Because you look at quarterback Desmond Ridder, and you also look at defensive back Javon Hicks, to name some of the key players that they're going to have coming back next year. I mentioned Memphis. Yes, they lost their head coach Mike Norvell to Florida State, but you still have Brady White under center at quarterback. You have Kenneth Gainwell at running back, and this guy is a flat-out stud. And Brady White and Gainwell, they're going to compete with each other in regards to being the American Athletic Conference Player of the Year for 2020. And Memphis, they gave Penn State all that they could handle in the Cotton Bowl, and Memphis is going to make a run as far as making another New Year's Six bowl game next season. You look at the Big Ten Conference with the Penn State Nittany Lions. They capped off an 11-2 season with a win over Memphis in the Cotton Bowl. James Franklin, their head coach, has done a solid job in recruiting in the Quaker State. He typically gets any of the top recruits from Pennsylvania to come to Happy Valley. Sean Clifford should be able to take the next step as a quarterback next season. We saw him, he had some good, he had some bad in 2019, but if he can play off the running game with the likes of Journey Brown and Noah Cain, and let's not forget on the defensive side of the ball with Micah Parsons, this kid was only a sophomore last season, and he was arguably the best defensive player in the Big Ten this side of Chase Young. Penn State's going to have some tough games next year. They're at Virginia Tech, they're at Michigan, and then they also host Ohio State on October 24th. That game could decide who wins the Big Ten East and gets to Indianapolis for the championship game. But after finishing in the top 10 this year, Penn State definitely has their eyes set on not only winning the Big Ten, but making the college football playoff for the first time in school history. Then you look at some teams out of the SEC. I want to start with the Florida Gators. Florida, in 2 years under Dan Mullen as their head football coach, they've won New Year's Six bowl games. Last year was the Peach Bowl, and this season, of course, they beat Virginia in the Orange Bowl. Who's going going to be the quarterback for Florida rather, in 2020? Will it be Kyle Trask or will it be Felipe Franks? Remember, Felipe Franks suffered that horrific leg injury during the season versus Kentucky. Kyle Trask stepped in and did a solid job. It looked like Felipe Franks was going to enter that transfer portal. Still a possibility, so I'm not sure if he's going to be with the Gator program in 2020. But make no mistake about it, Dan Mullen, whether it was his time as an assistant with Florida or his time as the head coach at Mississippi State or his time as the head football coach now with Florida, he has always done a solid job in developing his quarterbacks. 2 games to, circle on Florida's calendar for next season. They have LSU at home, and Florida gave LSU a pretty good run for their money this year. Granted, they did lose by 2 touchdowns in Baton Rouge in a night game, but I guarantee you that game is going to be circled for the Gators, as will their annual affair with Georgia down in Jacksonville. Why? Because Georgia is not expected to be as strong in 2020 as they have been in recent years. And this is a golden opportunity for the Gators to take advantage of that, get past Georgia, win the SEC East, and get to Atlanta to potentially win the SEC and get to the college football playoff. And why is that important? Because when you win the SEC, more than likely you have an open path to get to the field of 4. Sticking with the SEC, I'm looking at the Alabama Crimson Tide under the tutelage of head coach Nick Saban. And Alabama will definitely look to bounce back in a big way in 2020. Alabama suffered 2 losses during the regular season at home to LSU, and then they lost the Iron Bowl in their regular season finale to Auburn, and that prevented the Tide from getting back to the playoff. Now, of course, Alabama during the second half of the season, they didn't have the services of a healthy Tua Tagovailoa at quarterback. Nick Saban went with Mac Jones, and I think the Mac Jones project has already started, because you figure he started that last game of the season versus Auburn. He threw a couple of pick sixes in that game that really hurt Alabama. But you gave Nick Saban nearly a month to work with Mac Jones prior to their bowl game, and they took care of their business versus the Michigan Wolverines in the Citrus Bowl. And I guarantee you Saban is going to use that as a springboard for not only Mac Jones, but for the rest of his team heading into 2020. You're going to have Jalen Waddle back. I know that Alabama will lose some depth at the wide receiver position. I expect some of the youngsters on the defensive side of the ball to step up, because they played a lot of freshmen and sophomores this season in Tuscaloosa, 2 of them being linebacker Shane Lee and Christian Harris. Now, Alabama begins the season in Arlington versus USC out of the Pac-12. They have Georgia at home this year. They're at LSU in November, and I guarantee you Nick Saban has circled that game because he wants to get this Tide team back on track. And then they finish at home versus Auburn, and that is going to be an important game. Why? Because Auburn is a team that should be reckoned with in 2020 as well under head coach Gus Malzahn. We saw what Bo Nix could do as a freshman quarterback, and Malzahn is another guy who has a reputation for developing his quarterbacks. Bo Nix is a guy, he understands the Auburn program. Of course, his dad played there during the 90s, and now he wants to add to the family legacy there. He has talent around him on offense with Seth Williams at wide receiver and Jertavius Whitlow at running back. And you look at Auburn's schedule, they take on North Carolina early in the season in Atlanta. They're at Georgia later in the season. Of course, they host LSU, and they gave LSU a run for their money this year in Baton Rouge. And then, of course, the regular season finale on the road at Alabama. And like I said before, that game could decide who wins the SEC West and gets to Atlanta. Then you also look at Ohio State. Ohio State was 13-1 this season in their first year under head coach Ryan Day. I know that the Buckeyes will lose plenty of talent to the NFL, but there is one thing about the way that the Buckeyes do things. There is never a loss of talent for the squad in Columbus. You have Justin Fields returning at quarterback. You also look at a young running back in Master Teague III, who could be ready to step in and add his name to the long list of quality playmakers at the skill positions for the Buckeyes. Also keep an eye for wide receiver Chris Clave. He had a solid season this year, and I think he could build off of that heading into 2020. A couple of games to circle for the Buckeyes. On September 12th, they're at Oregon, and then a big one in October as they travel to Happy Valley. And like I said, that game could decide who wins the Big Ten East, especially if the Buckeyes are going to get back to the playoffs. So those are just several teams to look out for in the 2020 college football season. We still have plenty of months to go, before the start of the college football campaign. There's still a lot of recruiting to be done. But you know something, you can never overlook the blue bloods of the sport. They're going to be right back in the mix as the battle will be on to make that field of four, get to the college football playoff, and ultimately hoist the trophy as national champions for the 2020 season. So, folks, that's going to wrap it up. I want to take this time out to thank all of you for tuning in on YouTube. Please feel free to subscribe. If you're on Twitter, check us out at 300 Pounds of Sports. And if you're on Facebook, check me out at the Sports Depot 365. Once again, I am William Martin. Take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.